Okay. Good evening, everyone. Glad that all of you could join us. My name is Ujjwal Thakur. I'm one of the founders of Bharosa Club. I'm also the CTO, Chief Technology Officer. And what we'll be doing over the next about 30 odd minutes is I'll help you kind of understand how you can get started investing if you're new to investing or just got started, how you can use Bharosa to get onto the right path, right? And the reason I'm conducting this session is because just like all of you and most of you were here, I am also new to investing in a lot of ways. My exposure to finance was quite limited before I joined Bharosa. So I kind of understand, the dilemma that you guys go through, the questions that you have in mind, and I'll try to address, it in a sequential manner where my goal is that by the end of the next 30 minutes, you have a very clear sense of how you can leverage Bharosa to get onto the right track, start investing, take baby steps and gain more confidence so that you can then go to the next step and, analyze how you're doing. That is something that we'll cover in the next webinar, which Sahil is conducting, right? So at Bharosa, we do everything on first principles. The entire product that you see, the philosophy, it's all built on first principles, right? Why you do something matters, not just what you do. And so even when we talk about getting started investing, we should think about it in first principles. And that's how I intend to conduct this session. So let's start with the absolute basic. What is investing even, right?
Sorry to jump in real quick here, Ujjwal. If you guys have questions as Ujjwal is talking, put them in the chat. Anita will moderate the questions. And, that way, if there's anything pressing as we're going along, we can address them. Otherwise, we'll address them at the end.
Yeah, thanks, Sahil. Right. So as I was saying, why do we even invest, right? Why do you invest? And the whole idea with investing is that you have capital that somebody else at this point needs, right? You have spare capital. Savings is the foundation on which investing happens, right? You have capital that you do not need today. Somebody out there in the world does. And so what you do is you park your money temporarily with them and they promise to give you a return on that, right? Because you're kind of lending out your money to them. And how you do this is basically investing, and there are various ways you can invest. Okay, you can give out a loan, you can invest it, you can buy a share of the company, you can, put your money in something called liquid funds, and those are things we'll get into later. But essentially, you are being paid for the time value of your money, for parking your money with somebody else that you do not need today. And so the return that you get on your investment is determined by how long you are able to park that money, as well as what is the kind of risk associated with the activity for which you are, giving your money, right? So the first thing you have to ask yourself is the money that I want to invest, right? How do I start saving for that, right? And a good sort of thumb rule that I personally follow is that I put 20% of my monthly salary as investments. It doesn't have to, 20 is not a special number. It can be anything that makes sense to you, 10%, 20%, 15%, whatever. But a good way to get disciplined, which I see a lot of people, having issues with, which is how do I get disciplined about investing, is to basically take that money first out of your paycheck and invest it and then go along. So SIPs basically do that. And a lot of people get confused by what is an SIP, what is a stock, what is a mutual fund. And I'll address some of that, but SIP is basically a way you invest. Anyway, that's a little getting ahead of ourselves. So when you log into Bharosa and you sign up on Bharosa for the very first time, you get asked the question whether you have invested in mutual funds before or not, right? And if you're new to mutual funds, then you would have probably marked yourself as, being a non-investor. And this is the kind of dashboard that you would see, right? And I'll explain to you how do you use this to get to the next step, which is start investing. But before we even do that, let me address a very basic question on why this is all focused around mutual funds and what are mutual funds, right? So people have heard of, you must have heard of stocks, you must have heard the terms SIP, mutual funds. There's a lot of confusion out there on what these even mean, right? To put it very, very simply, a stock is a share of the company. That's why they're called shares. It's a piece of the company. while a mutual fund is actually a product manufactured by a company. So your, favorite banks, you generally have a mutual fund company. There are new age mutual fund companies, which are coming up. What they do is they construct a scheme which basically says, I have a plan on how to invest. You give me your money, I'm going to execute on that plan with your money, and I'll give you returns, right? So mutual funds can invest in practically any kind of asset. They can put your money obviously in shares, but they can also buy stocks with that. They can buy debt with that. They can buy all sorts of things depending on what the scheme is. And by law, every mutual fund is required to declare a benchmark. And a benchmark is basically what we call an index. It's a number that kind of gives you a broad sense of how a particular sector or subset of the market is doing. So when we say the markets are up, what we generally mean is Sensex is up, right? Or Nifty is up. These are benchmarks. These kind of give you an overall number on how the market is doing on a day-to-day basis, right? But there are tons of such benchmarks, and every mutual fund by law, as I said, is required to declare a benchmark. It is required to say, here is my benchmark, this is what you compare me against, and I'm either going to try to beat this benchmark, or I'm going to try to just track this closely. I'm going to mirror it. Okay. The ones which try to beat their benchmark are called active funds. They generally charge a little bit higher, and they basically promise that I have a strategy that can beat this benchmark. I can beat Sensex, right? And the other ones are called passive funds because they don't do much. All they do is copy the benchmark, right? And therefore the fees on them are generally low. And what we broadly recommend for at least people who are getting started with investing is that you stick to passives, for the simple reason that you do not have a broad understanding of how a particular sector works or market works. Now, this is just very general rule of thumbs. None of this is advice, right? So if you understand a sector really well, take a bet, but you have to then track it. And that's where Bharosa also plays a major role. So a mutual fund is, as I said, basically a product that takes your money and invests in it. And SIP is a way to invest in a mutual fund. SIP stands for Systematic Investment Plan. All it does is automatically takes money out of your bank account and invests it in the schemes of your choosing. And this ties into the discipline question. A lot of people struggle with discipline on investing and saving. The way to overcome that and why SIPs are so popular is because they do that on your behalf. They maintain that discipline. You set up your SIPs, you say, this is the kind of money I want to invest in this scheme, on the 3rd of every month, and it'll automatically happen. Now, once you, decide to figure out how much you want to invest, the next question obviously is, where do I invest, right? And Bharosa says that mutual funds are a really great product. And the reason for that is that investing in general is like placing a bet, right? So let's assume that you were trying to place a bet on a match between India and Pakistan, a cricket match in the upcoming World Cup, right? Now, how specific a bet you can make is dependent on how much you understand the game of cricket and the specific conditions on the match, right? If you are somebody who has no interest in cricket, but you're forced to place a bet and you know nothing about cricket, you'd probably place a bet on whether India will win or Pakistan will win, right? But if you're really a cricket fanatic, okay, and you really understand the pitch and the team and all the dynamics going around, you can take a more nuanced bet, right? Similarly, in the world of investing, a stock is the most specific bet that you can take. You're basically betting on a very specific company. You're saying this company is going to do well, irrespective of whether its competitors go bust or the market in general, is not doing that well. I'm betting that this company is going to do well. Mutual funds diversify that risk, right? By investing in a bunch of assets, a bunch of stocks, a bunch of bonds, right? And therefore, we recommend that if you do not have a very specific idea on where you want to invest or a very specific understanding of the market, which is most of the people, I am like that, right? I don't have specific views on the market. Then mutual funds are a great product to get started on that because they diversify the specific assets that I'm betting on, right? And specifically passive funds, because all I'm saying is I think the markets are going to do well. I want to keep track with them. I don't want to get left behind, right? And when I get a little familiar with it, when I get a little, comfortable investing, then I can look at making more specific bets and investing in active funds. So the very first step that you take is, okay, I'm going to invest. Mutual funds are a great product. How do I do that? Right? How do I even get started investing? And before we get into that, let me quickly explain the two types of mutual fund schemes that are out there. One are called direct schemes, the other are called regular schemes. Okay, regular schemes are the schemes that are usually sold by your bank to you, your relationship manager, okay, or like a broker or an advisor who comes to you. If you are not paying a fee to your advisor or your bank for the mutual funds that you are buying, you are in a regular scheme most likely. And you can see that in the name. And what that basically means is that you are paying a commission out of the money that you are investing. Okay, while a direct scheme takes the entire amount and invests it directly. So you are responsible for managing that. There is no advisor out there. And we believe at Bharosa that most people can do this on their own. Okay. If you have an advisor, great. Use Bharosa to track them to see whether they are actually paisa vasool or not, whether the funds that they've put you in are delivering value or not, right? But if you're just getting started, we'd rather recommend that you start with a direct scheme. And a great way to do that is a lot of these apps that are out there nowadays, right? There is Zerodha, there is Grow, there is Paytm Money, quite a few. A lot of them are also, into regular schemes. So you have to be a little careful. But what you can see on the dashboard right now is you will see this two buttons, import portfolio and playground. If you go to playground, okay, you'll see this tab called get started. And we'll come to the playground very soon, because once you get started, then you're basically going to spend a lot of time on the playground. But before you do that, and if you haven't even gotten started on investing, go to get started and you'll see a couple of recommendations from our end. Okay. Now, we don't have any tie-ups with these apps, or it's not like, but these are curated by us based on, us trying them out and stuff like that. There is another app that you might not have heard of here called MFU, which is Mutual Fund Utilities. This is formed by the Association of all mutual fund manufacturers. All of these apps, by the way, are free, right? So choose whatever you like, whatever interface you like. All of them will put you into direct schemes, and that's what you want. Where you transact is not all that critical, and they're quite seamless to get started on, right? And you can take help from their own support to help you do the KYC and stuff like that. Once you are done that, you are set to invest. At that point, you have an account, you have your app with you, and you can basically get started investing at any point of time during the day. You can invest at 3 p.m. if you want. That's the beauty of technology today, right? And what you'll see next on this page is what we call Wealthsimple bundles. So these are the absolute starting point for someone who has zero clue on what to do. Okay, and investment in playground is a slightly more advanced concept, the better way to invest, right? But if it takes you a little while to get comfortable with that, you can just get started here. These are all the equity passive funds out there which have extremely low SIPs. For example, Navi Nifty 50 year, you can get started with just 10 rupees a month. That's it. And the fees are incredibly low, right? Just 0.06% on your total investment. Okay, so we don't have any bias here. You can pick whichever you like, choose your favorite fund out. All of these are good, right? Based on what is the amount you want to invest and what mutual fund company you want to go with, right? But the more interesting part is once you get comfortable and you want to make a more informed investment, you go to the playground. And the playground essentially is built on this idea at Bharosa Club that we call holding power, right? Which is what the fund that you invest in is important, but what is much more important is your asset allocation, deciding what assets to park your money in, right? And that will matter a lot more in the long run than the specific fund that you choose. Okay, because even an average performing equity fund will deliver a better return than your best debt funds out there in general, right? Because that's the nature of equity, right? It grows much faster there, but also it comes with other risks like volatility, which is how much it goes up and down on a day-to-day basis. And so really the idea of holding power is that you look at the amount of money that you have right now, right, which you want to invest, and you say, when do I need this money in the future? Okay, do I need it 6 months down the line? Do I need it 1 year down the line? Okay, how much of it do I need at different points over the next 10 years, 15 years, right? If you can get that idea straight in your head, a lot of your job is basically done because you've figured out what asset classes to invest in. And that's where the investment playground helps you. So you click on new investment plan and you see this. And here you'll see we have 4 time horizon buckets that we have partition holding power in. Okay. And in general, we recommend that you start filling these in the same order, right? So for example, emergency. Emergency is money that you could need at a moment's notice, right? Now, the way you go about thinking on emergency money is how am I going to fund emergencies in my life? What happens if, God forbid, I lose my job? How am I going to fund my expenses till I find the next job? Or what if there is a major emergency? And there are a lot of ways to mitigate emergency, so it's personal to everyone, right? You could have a backing, you could have insurance, you could have savings, right? So it's not necessarily that you have to do emergency just through mutual funds, but this is for you to figure out that if there is money that you want to put into mutual funds, right? And there is good reason that you should put them into mutual funds, is simply because the rate of return that you get on these funds is much better than what your bank gives you. The flip side to that is that with a bank, you get immediate liquidity, right? Money in my bank can be accessed at a moment's notice. Mutual fund redemption will probably take you at least a day, if not more, right? So you figure out what is the money that I could need at any point of time, right? Like you could say, hey, the market doesn't look good. What if I lose my job? I need 6 months worth of, expenses, just sitting there and keeping pace with inflation. That's the kind of money you put into emergency. Okay. 1 to 3 years is your short-term money, immediate expenses, a vacation you want to take, a car you want to purchase, right? Anything that is on that horizon. And each of these time horizons are basically mapped to a asset type, right? And we'll get into why. The third bucket is 3 to 7 years, which is a medium term horizon, right? Which are kind of life goals that you wish to fulfill in a slightly longer time period, maybe getting married or a dream vacation or something like that. And then anything that either is clearly very long term, which is 7 years plus, or for which you do not have a specific purpose in mind right now, right? That goes into your over 7 years bucket, which is equity. Okay. And you can actually, I will not go into the specifics of these buckets and how they're comprised because that's a little out of scope for this call. But you can click the view bundle link and you will find answers to a lot of your questions. If you have more questions, you can obviously email us at support@bharosaclub.com, right? But let me kind of show you how you can use the playground, right? What you have here is essentially 2 tabs. One is your one-time investments, right? You have money right now, you want to invest all of it. That's your one-time investment. SIPs, as I said, is recurring investments. So you might decide that, hey, I don't want to get into the market all in one. I want to do it over a period of time. Okay. So you could put in SIP amount and per month what you want to invest, right? And as you start entering amounts here, you will see the playground change right as you type. And what it tells you is that over a different time periods, what is the value of your overall investment going to be, right? So for example, I put 500 rupees into emergency. It tells me that 5 years from now, that 500 rupees on average based on past data. Okay, and this is very, very accurate past data, right? But it is past data, so it cannot project for the future. It'll on average, it will turn into 680 rupees, which is a return of 6.4%. What it also additionally tells you, and this is interesting, is how bad on average can it get. So the worst case scenario, again, based on past data, is that you could get a 4.7% return, which is slightly below inflation. Slightly. That's the absolute worst case, which includes the pandemic, it caters for the 2008 financial crisis and stuff like that. And also tells you what's the best run that you could possibly have, right? And as you scroll here, as you go to different time periods, you see that emergency money is basically very, very stable. Okay, on average, it gives you anywhere between 6 to 6.6% return. And that's the purpose of the emergency bundle, right? It is to preserve your money and keep it abreast with inflation. Because what you want is that money is always available in case of an emergency, right? That's the characteristic you are seeking here. Now you could say, okay, I want to put 500 rupees into emergency. And let's say instead of that, I decide to put 500 rupees into over 7-year bucket. What happens now? As you'll notice, over 1 year, it is extremely volatile. Okay, the best case is 126% return, which is crazy, right? And the absolute worst case is that you could lose more than half of your wealth. And this is why holding power is important, because where you invest has a lot to do with how long can you stay invested. A lot of people who were in stocks, in equity, where they did not have holding power, had to quit and get out of the market during the pandemic, right? Because they did not have the holding power to stay there. If they did, they would have had phenomenal returns post the 3-4 month period that the market were a little tumultuous, right? And so you'll see that over a short period of time, so for over 7-year period bucket, anything under 7 years, your worst case is you could lose money, right? And as the time period goes on, it gets better and better. Till at the 7-year period, you see that the absolute worst case is that your money will stay where it was, adjusted for inflation. So you won't lose wealth, right? And your average return, again, based on past data, is 12.6%, right? At 10 years, it's kind of the same. And your worst case gets a little better, right? But your average case is pretty good. But that's only if you're willing to hold onto this money for 7 years. And just like that, you have these other buckets which do the same. And the reason this is interesting is that you can take the amount that you have and you can say, okay, when do I need different, how do I partition this so I know when do I need different amounts of money? If you have a monthly income and you want to invest a part of that, you can decide how do you fund different things, right? Short-term, vacations, medium-term life goals. How do you park money that you have no clear use case of, or something that you really know is only going to be needed in 10 years, right? And what it does at the end of the day is basically, it makes sure that when you need that money, you will have that money. Okay. And you get the best bang for your buck for your holding power. So a lot of people, for example, I know personally, who have the holding power to stay invested for 7 years, but are afraid of the stock markets and they invest in FDs and gold and stuff like that, right? But data clearly shows here that if you stay for 7 years, you're not going to lose money. Stocks are extremely risky in the short term. If you need that money a year from now, 2 years from now, even I would say 3-4 years from now, and you put it in the stock market, there is a chance that you could lose it, right? But if you stay invested for 7 years, it's highly, highly, highly unlikely that you would lose wealth, right?
Yeah, I'll just jump in
worse,
briefly here. So Ujjwal's exactly right. The only caveat is all the data that we're showing here only applies to broadly diversified mutual funds. So what we're not trying to say here that if you hold any share or scrip and you hold it for 7 years, you will make money. That's not the intention here. There is a big difference in betting on an individual share or scrip and betting on a broad fund that tracks the overall market. So basically, the advantage of investing in mutual funds, it allows you to realize your holding power.
Exactly. And that's why we recommend mutual fund, right? Instead of picking a specific, it's the same idea with the sports analogy, right? If you diversify the assets, specific assets that you're investing in, if they're broadly diversified enough, then the likelihood that a failure of any one of those stocks or bonds is going to affect your entire corpus goes extremely low. So all of this, by the way, as Sahil said, exactly applies to broad diversified mutual funds. None of this applies to shares, right? Shares could go down to zero. A mutual fund is a broad diversified mutual fund is highly unlikely to go to zero. Like the stock market is not going to go to zero, but a specific stock can do that, right? And so as you partition your money and you play around, you get a really good sense for, how you should partition your money for the risk and reward that you are seeking, right? You could, for example, decide that you can change some of your expectations, right, for a better return, or you could get a little more conservative than you wanted to be because of how bad situations can get, right? And so this is basically what the investment playground does. And before we open up to questions and stuff like that, I'll just quickly summarize this for you once again. The idea is that the way to get started with investing is, one, invest in direct funds, not regular funds. You can do that through the apps that we showed you. You can go to the get started section, look at the app recommendations, go sign up on them, right? Step two, if you want to take really baby steps, there is something called a Wealth Simple bundle there. And let me also show it to you, right? So you can just invest in one of these schemes to get started. Again, choose what you like. And we are soon going to come out with a feature that helps you explore the entire mutual fund universe. But these are good guiding, thumb rules for people who are just getting started. And when you get a little more comfortable, then you come on to the investment playground. And as I said, the idea is, take the corpus that you have that you want to invest, first save money, then figure out how you want to partition it. Make a list of, where do I intend to spend this money that I'm investing eventually, and when do I need to do that, right? The longer you can hold on, the better your return is going to be. If you take money that you need 1 year, 2 year down the line and put it into stocks, who knows what's going to happen, right? The markets could be anywhere in 2 years. You could make a great profit, but you could also lose all of that amount. But if you stay invested for a long enough duration, you will generally do well. And that's the sort of framework, mental model with which I think you should, and everyone should go. And that's how I also invest, right?
Yeah, so I think the key insights here that we are trying to deliver to the new mutual fund investor here is, the simpler you keep it, the more easy your job becomes in investing. The classic mistake that we see new investors do are twofold. On the one hand, you have investors that keep their money in a bank fixed deposit, and that's it. If you're doing that, you are not taking advantage of your holding power. You're not getting paid for your holding power. You may be able to keep your money untouched for 7 years, but you're just earning an FD rate of return. That is not a way to create wealth. That's a way to protect wealth. So that's one mistake that we see new investors making. And the second mistake that we see new investors making is jumping into ultra risky assets. You'll hear at a dinner party, or Bitcoin is a great investment, or this stock is a great investment, or you'll see a influencer pitch something, and you'll invest in it without realizing that that is an extremely risky proposition, and that you can lose a lot of money doing it. The advantage of the approach Ujjwal nicely outlined, and the key insight that we have for new investors, is if you keep things simple, if you focus on broad market tracking mutual funds, and you just assign your investments correctly to how long you can hold it, you will do great. Our data says you will do better than most investors, even experts, because you've answered the simple questions really well. And that's that one takeaway that we want new investors to have coming out from here. Tune out all the noise. Don't listen to influencers. Don't listen to CNBC. Just put your head down and figure out, of your corpus, where do you put each of these funds, and keep it simple and low cost investments. And that's, I think, the key punchline.
Okay, so should we get to the questions? There's a bunch of questions that have come in. Okay. The first question is, how do you calculate how bad could it get percentage? And why is it positive for 7 years, let's say?
So, Ujjwal, do you want to take that, or you want me to take it?
Oh, good.
So, Smriti, this is a really good question. So, this is the advantage of a broad-based mutual fund, right? When you're talking about a specific scrip or share, or even a sector-based fund, the how bad you can get would surely be negative, even for 7 years or 10 years. But when you pick the types of investments that we are using in the playground, which again, you can see when you click view bundle, because they're so broad, they're tracking the overall market. So you can see they're tracking the indexes of the Nifty 100, the Nifty mid cap, and the Nifty small cap. So really what you're doing when you're picking these funds is you're saying, I want a little piece of India. I want to invest in a little piece of India. Now, could this change in the future? Absolutely. India could have a horrible string of years and the economy could go south for a long time. But just so you guys have context, the data set we've analyzed here that's powering the playground, as Ujjwal mentioned, has seen many recessions, has seen a pandemic, has seen lots of global volatility. And what we basically calculate in the how bad it could get is we say, if we look at history and you're prepared to hold your money for 7 years, if we pick the worst point you could have bought and held it for 7 years, what would your return have been? So it would have been the worst possible return you could have got over that year, over that data set. And we analyzed around 20 years of data, right? And so surprisingly, it's a positive number if you're able to hold it for 7 years. And so that's the key message here. Equity in these kind of funds held for a long time is really not that risky.
Okay, I've heard of something called a CAN, a common account number. What is this? And should I get a CAN? How easy is it to get a CAN? So let me answer that question. So a CAN is a common account number. One of the places when Ujjwal showed you the various apps that you could invest from, like Grow, etc. One of the ones is MFU, Mutual Fund Utility. That's my personal top favorite. It's a little clunky, it's a little ugly, etc., etc. Its user interface is not the best, but why I like it is they don't do any marketing emails to you, etc. Now, what they do is they issue a common account number or a CAN, and that is the account number that is used across mutual funds. And it's extremely easy to get it. It's online, it's fully electronic, and you know, that's what it is. So yes, everybody can get a CAN. A minor can get a CAN, NRI, NRO, NRE, joint, whichever combination you want. Some of the other apps are a little restrictive for various combinations. Like I think it's, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think minors can invest on Grow, for example. But I'm not 100% sure of that. Anyway, the next question is, there are so many mutual funds mentioned. How do you know which is good or bad? I'm totally new to this. Is it all trial and error, taking a chance?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. So we are going to create a tool called Explore Funds, which Ujjwal mentioned, which we'll release that will help you evaluate mutual funds that you may be recommended by somebody or someone tells you to buy or whatever. But in the absence of that, while that's coming out, basically, if you're investing in an active fund, like Ujjwal mentioned, a fund that is making a bet that is different than the market, and it's a specific sector, or even if it's a passive fund that picks a specific sector, then if you're a newbie, it is basically trial and error and you're taking a chance. But the good news is you don't need to do that. By sticking to the fund types that we show you in the playground, you will not be taking an incremental chance beyond just the overall market, because these funds specifically just track the market. So that is our recommendation for newbies. Start with these funds. And just so we're very clear, Bharosa makes no commission of any fund that you buy. We take no money from anybody to show you these funds. The way we pick these funds is we look for funds that are suitable for newbies and that charge the lowest expense ratios. These are very cheap, cost-effective funds, and we genuinely believe they're good for people. There's no ulterior motive here. In fact, we don't even let you buy through our platform. So you can't even buy through Bharosa. You have to go somewhere else, right? So that should give you a lot of comfort that the advice we're giving is pure and honest.
And I'll just quickly jump in, Melanie. If you're talking about the list here, if you see, all of these are basically large cap index funds. So they all do exactly the same thing. Okay, it's not a question of which one is better, which one is worse. They will by and large do the same thing, which is track the top 50 companies of India at any given point of time, right? And they have different fees because they're different manufacturers. So feel free to go with whoever you like. We recommend to keep the fees as low as possible, right? So they're sorted in that order, but they're basically all the same, which is they invest in the largest companies of India and they only track them very, very closely. So there's very little that can go wrong in that tracking. They're not really trying to beat the market. They're just copying the market as it changes.
Yeah, and that's really important because, there are lots of examples of even big companies in India having big issues. So Adani Group companies, for example, or DHFL, these were all very big companies that suddenly ran into problems. But the advantage of these passive funds is, they're going to track India at large. Will they own a little bit of Adani and a little bit of DHFL and a little bit of these stocks? Yes. But because they're so diversified, and taking bets across so many different things, you're really limiting your exposure to individual stocks.
Okay, so the next question is, if I'm investing already, then why start with passive funds? And why not the less risky, less SIP, less fee active mutual fund?
I think there was another question by Smriti just before that. I think that got left.
Okay, how do you know those were the passive funds? How do you filter them out and get such a list?
Yeah, so Barosa has access to data on all the mutual funds in India. So we handcrafted this from all that data. You guys will get access to that soon. Once we release Explore Funds, you'll be able to play around and see all the data on all the mutual funds. But the way we know they're passive funds is because of their in every document, your strategy and the benchmark you track has to be disclosed to the investor. So we're able to look and see, okay, this mutual fund is an active fund. It is trying to beat the Nifty 100, or this is a passive fund. It is trying to meet the Nifty 100, and that's how we determine it.
So she said, if she's already investing, why start with passive funds?
Yeah. So the question says, and not the less risky, less
active funds. Yeah.
Actually, passive funds are less risky in general and less expensive than active funds. So we're recommending passive because it is less risky and less expensive. So an active fund is basically telling the investor, hey, trust me, I'm really good at picking stocks. I'm going to tell you out of these 50 stocks, which are the ones that are going to do well, which are the ones that are going to do badly, and I'm going to make bets on them. So like Ujjwal was saying, they consider themselves experts and they're going to actually handpick stocks. What data has shown is that a lot of these active funds don't actually manage to beat the benchmarks. And so they charge you an extra fee, but you don't actually get vasool. And that's a lot of what Bharosa's technology does, is it makes sure that the active funds in your portfolio are actually delivering on their promise. So Smriti, our recommendation is passive precisely because it is less risky and less expensive.
Okay, the next question is, I'm already using the MFU app and investing for 5 years now. Should I limit to one folio number for all the funds of that particular fund house, or should I have a separate folio for child's wedding, etc.? So let me answer that. To manage, personally, I find a smaller number of mutual fund folio numbers easier. If you like seeing multiple ones, etc., I see a lot of people who do that. I don't see a reason why anyone should do that. And the other thing is, money is really fungible. So, it's not like, if you have one large, like put all your money into, let's say, one Nifty 100 fund, right? You can withdraw parts of it for your child's wedding and one for retirement, etc. But if you like keeping it separate, you're most welcome to have another folio number. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a question of how many line items do you like seeing on your, portfolio and in your cash statements, etc. Okay. The next question is, how do you get the historical 20-year data on mutual funds?
Yeah, so the 20-year data that we get from mutual funds is sourced through publicly available data. So AMFI, which is the Association of Mutual Funds, they publish NAVs, which are the prices of these mutual funds for years and years, since inception, basically. So you can pull this data and analyze it, which is precisely what we've done.
Okay. The next question is, how do you arrive at the funds chosen in each bundle for the investment playground? Also, would you be providing analytics around passive funds like tracking error, AUM, etc.?
Yeah, so the bundles are chosen very carefully. So let's take the equity example, equity bundle as an example. We have a ratio of index funds here that closely approximates the total market. So how did we choose 75% in Nifty 100? When you look at the overall composition of the stock market in India, around 75% of the market capitalization of the market is in large cap funds. So that's why 75% is in the bundle that we show. 20% is in mid caps and 5% is in small caps. So when you invest in the bundle in this ratio, you're not going to get left behind if small caps do better or mid caps do better or large caps do better. You're going to track the market no matter what. You're not taking a bet on anything. So that's how we chose it. In terms of providing analytics around passive funds like tracking error and AUM, very good point. Those are all going to be available when we release Explore funds. We were going to show you data on tracking error, AUM, fees, consistency of performance, which benchmark they track, all of that, bets that they're taking, everything will be included in Explore funds. So stay tuned on that. Then there's a question from Smithy, why not invest in these benchmarks, Nifty, etc., when you're just starting? Good question. Unfortunately, you can't just invest in the benchmark. You can't just say, I'm going to go buy Nifty 50 because they don't have a product for that. So the mutual funds that track the Nifty 50, they actually have the product that allows you to invest in the Nifty 50. And these are the funds that we're recommending in the bundles. Then how can I get that data? The AMFI data. So the AMFI data, you can just go to AMFI's website. Is it amfi.com or amfi.org?
I'm forgetting, but Smithy,
Do a Google search for AMFI.
If you are interested, just send a
amfiindia.com.
yeah, something
Publicly
like
available. You can
it's publicly available.
download it from there. It'll have data on passive mutual funds as well.
And there you can ask for historical NAVs. If you
How
want to.
secure is the data with your website? If someone uploaded MF investment data on your website, Ujjwal, you want to take this?
Sure. So one, we encrypt all data while it is in rest as well as in transit. So whenever you're communicating with the website, any data that gets uploaded, downloaded, it's completely encrypted with 256-bit encryption. Even on the database end, every information is encrypted. So nobody can look at it. For whatever reason, if like records get leaked, nobody will be able to read those records because even at rest in storage inside the database, they're completely encrypted and they're only unlocked when you want to access them.
The next question.
The other thing I would say to Sukhdeep, the other thing that should give you comfort is that Bharosa never takes any custody of your funds. Your funds don't sit with Bharosa, just your data sitting with us. And that, as Ujjwal mentioned, is encrypted and we're taking data protection measures. But the other thing that should give you a lot of comfort is that, God forbid, your account were hacked or something like that, no one can get at your money here. It's we are simply giving you data to analyze your portfolio and make better decisions. Your money is not sitting here or anything. I know that you're going to be good in 7 to 10 years anyway, then why not go for active? Smriti, that's a good question. The playground is only relevant to passive. Because the thing is, when an active manager makes a decision, he could make horribly wrong decisions. So for example, an active manager could have said, oh, Adani stocks just keep going up and up and up and up and up. I'm going to allocate 30% of my fund in Adani stocks, right? And then when the downturn happened in Adani stocks, that mutual fund would have taken a big loss, right, on those stocks. And so that is the risk you take with active. You're now not just betting on the market, you're also betting on the fund manager. And you don't know this fund manager. You don't know if he's good. You don't know what his strategies are. So it's, in our view, not good to do that if you don't have a reason. And the playground is not valid for things where you're making active bets. So
Right.
it's not true that it's going to be good in 7 to 10 years with an active
And
fund.
I'll just quickly jump in and say something. Most active funds, if you see, will probably not even last 10 years. So they either will never generate an alpha, which is beat the market, or they'll have a very good run. But as the market cycle changes, they will start losing out, and very, very few active funds actually survive all that long.
Actually, there's
There are some, but not all.
a website called Spiver, and Spiver reports are really nice and very well regarded. And in that, the data is that over 80% of large cap active funds do not beat their indexes, their benchmarks over a period of time. So the data is pretty shocking. And that's why, we say that, look, rather than get into an active fund, monitor it, see whether the fund manager is delivering or not, etc., and get out at the right time, etc., which is really difficult. Go into a passive fund. Don't take fund manager risk, just take market risk.
Yeah. So now let's take through these questions quickly because the
Because we don't have
existing
much time.
investors call will start soon. All index funds are equity, right? Yes, for the most part, all index funds are equity. Debt index funds are just starting now, but there isn't a lot of liquidity and choice in there right now. But it's a market that hopefully will start developing further. So let's stay tuned and hope that passive also becomes an option in debt.
So Peep's next question is the data has folio information and bank information.
I'll
So
go through the
give me
question.
a folio number. Yeah.
No
Go
bank
ahead.
information.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's no bank information inside your cash statement. All it has is a folio number, and that's not very helpful for anyone to do anything, right?
But
So
look, yeah, to be frank, I mean, anytime you put your data anywhere, you are running a risk that that data gets exposed somehow. We take a lot of precautions at Bharosa Club, but it is a risk. And you have to weigh the risk of that data being compromised with the benefit you get from sharing that data. And at Bharosa, we take our members' data very seriously. So we'll do everything we can to safeguard it. And also, as you'll see in our data sharing and privacy policy, we will not sell your data. And this data is just intended to help you make better decisions and help all our members make better decisions, essentially.
Okay, do you recommend a book on?
Yes.
Yes, sure.
So there is a book on passive investing that I think everyone should read. It's called The Little Book of Common Sense Investing. It's by the godfather of passive investing called John Bogle. He started the largest mutual fund company in the world called Vanguard, and they only sell passive products. And John Bogle's thesis was that in a world where information is starting to get more and more prevalent, it is harder and harder to beat the market. So rather than spend money trying to beat the market, a really good approach is to minimize your costs and meet the market. While I don't 100% agree with that approach, I do think that most people should be using passive funds a lot more than they are currently. So it's a great book to help you understand the case for passive funds. So that's a good one. Any other recommendations on the team?
No, I think, one's enough for people to get started with. And we're also, well, we have time for one more question, which was sitting somewhere embedded in the questions, which is, you did have a link on the Getting Started page to Mutual Fund Sahi Hai and Jan Nivesh. What do you mean by Jan Nivesh? So let me answer that. We actually think that just like you have Jan Dhan, where the government thought everybody should have a bank account, we actually think that people should have a mutual fund account, whether they are rich, poor, babies, adults, retired, working, etc. And, and the good thing is that the manufacturers, like Ujjwal showed you, Navi, you can try out mutual funds with 10 rupees a month. Okay. So let's say you have domestic help in your home and they just put 10 rupees a month. In 1 year, they would have learned a huge lesson on investing, seeing how it can go up, how it can go down, etc., which is much more than any lesson that you can theoretically give someone. So, what we would encourage people to do is really get your staff also, get your children, your siblings, etc., to get started. Let them put in 10 rupees a month. It's a lesson that they will learn.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a little bit to that the investing playground, I've used it very effectively to show people, who may have invested in, say, fixed deposits, and said that, okay, if you put 1,000 rupees in fixed deposits for 10 years as an SIP, like the recurring deposit, and if you put that same 1,000 rupees instead in over 7-year bucket, so that 1,000 rupees, which is put in a fixed deposit, goes into emergency, while the 1,000 rupees put into the other bucket goes into over 7 years. And you can just see the difference, and it is really an eye-opener for them, saying how much wealth they're kind of losing by just sticking with fixed deposits.
If there's one parting story I'd have to leave the new investors with before we start for existing investors, it's what Sanjay is saying is one, that tragedy of people not capturing the power of their holding power and just seeing their money grow like this when it could grow like this. The second is the flip side. People that get started and someone tells them, oh, you should invest in this mutual fund. It's been doing great. But what they don't realize is that mutual fund is not a broad mutual fund. It's investing in a specific sector. That sector did great for a period and then suddenly starts doing badly. And then they lose money on it. They sell it in 3 years because that's when they needed the money. And they've had a horrible experience with mutual funds and never will invest in it again. Both are very, very tragic stories that we're trying to help people avoid. Keeping it simple and, essentially narrowing down your problem to not picking specific sectors, specific stocks, but just saying, how long can I keep my money parked and locked away? And then just buying the assets that correspond to that, and you're doing great. You're not going to get left behind. And that's the whole point of investing, is to keep pace with the market and grow with the country. So with that,
Right.
Why don't we take a quick break and then we will resume with the existing call.